I would like to share with you kind of what are the clinical trials of the future. I'd like to start with, first of all, my views, not Genentech or Roche's views. I'd like to start with a tweet that came out earlier this year in March by John Wilbanks. He said, after 6 hours, we have enrolled 7,406 people in our Parkinson's study. Largest one ever done before was 1,700. That's pretty amazing. For us in pharma, we struggle with clinical trials and recruiting patients into trials, and it was amazing for us to see this happen. In fact, Apple actually did 5 studies, and all of them were wildly successful. Apple blew this problem out of the water, and sure, you can discuss, well, there wasn't drug, we don't know if the patients will stay on, we don't know if they're real, and there's all kinds of things, but their ability to actually engage so many people at this scale was certainly worth looking at and thinking about. And the reason is there's plenty of patients that are motivated and are hopeful that there will be new treatments. One of our earlier speakers had talked about how only 12% of known diseases have treatments, but the pipeline of hope is still really slow and expensive. $2.5 billion, 12 to 15 years. We heard Atul talk a lot about the early discovery in preclinical and how mining data and doing all these online preclinical shops have really reduced. He was able to reduce that preclinical space to 24 months. And the FDA has done lots of things like the PDUFA Act, expedited approval pathways to reduce the approval path. But that huge green section in the middle is still a big bottleneck. How many of you have researchers in the room that have struggled with clinical trial recruitment, no matter what you're studying? Entrepreneurs, all of you have to get into some type of clinical trial to generate evidence. And this is a huge bottleneck. And there hasn't been a lot of focus on what we could do there. In fact, the advancement of scientific discovery in genomics and the omics, biomarkers, has actually resulted in more complex trials. We actually have increased the number of procedures that we request in our trials. It takes almost 70% more effort to do a trial. The length is increased to 70% by 70%. This is data out of Tufts Center for Study of Drug Development. And of course, more complex, longer trials, less patients are participating, enrollment rates have gone down, and retention rates have gone up. So it's become even more challenging, even though the science is getting really exciting. We all really want to get these trials done. And what's interesting to me is we've also created these two worlds, these two independent worlds that generate evidence now with the new emerging technologies. We have the clinical trial world because we wanted to protect the scientific rigor and the safety of patients. We've created this world where we want ideal circumstances in a controlled setting and a placebo arm, and fundamentally made for patients of the future. And our primary purpose is to really get regulatory approval, and we often have a very fixed regimen. But there's the clinical care world that is also generating data and evidence, but it's under the usual circumstances, and it's the real world setting, and it's for the benefit of the present patient right now. Yet they're really learning a lot in this heterogeneity group of patients, and it's a very flexible regimen. But the two worlds are very much separated, and there's opportunity here for us to change that. And it's not all gloom and doom. There's lots of really great opportunities, and over the last 3 years at Genentech, we've been really focused on how can we rethink drug development and really leverage not only the scientific discoveries that are happening, but all the emerging technologies, because our lives have been transformed in other aspects of our world, like how we bank, our entertainment, but our clinical world is still somewhat the same, medicine is still the same, and clinical research is definitely the same since we've done it 50 years ago. But we now have empowered patients, and we truly believe that this combination of empowered patients and all these emerging technologies are the right ingredients to exponentially transform drug development, and in particular, that bottleneck of clinical trials. So at Genentech, we tried to learn from our fellow Silicon Valley neighbors and apply design thinking to the clinical trial challenge and try to understand what is the real problem. We've spent many years trying to improve clinical trial recruitment by adding more sites, adding more countries, and we know that patients want to participate. They are motivated. Apple Research Kit told us that as well. But trials, 80% of trials are delayed. And what we found is when we went to actual patients and asked them and tried to understand, we discovered that the three major hurdles to participating, we make it super hard to participate. Only 30% of patients actually live near any of the centers where we run our trials, so geography is a huge hurdle. Combined with only 1 out of 3 patients that live near the site actually become aware of the opportunity to participate. And even if they become aware, they still don't trust that they can move from their local trusted doctor to an investigator of a clinical trial. So that continuity of care is really disrupted. And so you only have about 3 to 5% of patients that participate in trials. Even in therapeutic areas like oncology, we have anywhere from 10 to 15% of patients. So no wonder we have a big problem with recruiting into trials. So we thought, okay, it's not a supply-demand problem, it's a network problem. And so we thought, well, let's see if we can unlock access by shifting the nodes in the network. So we thought we would try something where we move away from the patients or the investigator-centric model, where we start up a bunch of medical centers and train them up to the trials, but start with identifying the patients first, and then mobilize through various channels, and then mobilize their participation. So bringing the trials to the patient. So the idea is really we would activate a big central center, and then we'd go and find the patient. And once we identified the patient, we would mobilize their local care center, their local lab, their local imaging center, their community oncologist, and then we'd leverage remote tools like remote monitoring and a mobile nurse, and then connect them back to the principal investigator using telemedicine. So at a high level, this is kind of what the new model was. And we tried the model in a rare disease trial. This is a trial in pemphigus vulgaris, which is a rare autoimmune skin disease. It is horrific to have and life-threatening. And the typical approach that we would do in pharma in a rare disease trial is we would start it up. You usually need about 120 patients. And we'd start it up in 11 countries, 67 sites, with the goal of each center enrolling 1 patient per year. And it'll take us 2 years to run this trial. And the reason we do all the sites is so we can get it done in 2 years versus 5 years. In this study, what we did is we added 1 center within the decentralized trial model, and basically as a partner company by the name of Science 37. And basically what they did was they had expertise in both clinical research and telemedicine. And they actually just only went to 7 states because of the various telemedicine laws. But what we discovered was they blew it out of the water. The trial has been running for about 7 months, and they were 20 times faster. They enrolled 10 patients in just 7 months, which might not seem like a lot of patients, but in a rare disease, that's really hard to get to. And they even referred patients to other centers. And what we found is that the patients also had a really good experience. So let me let you see that.
When Angel first started getting sick, most of the time all we did was cry.
My lips would crack all the time. They were constantly bleeding, scabbing up. It was very hard to eat. People would look at me funny in my classes, but I kept trying to go to school, and eventually I finished the 2nd semester of my credential barely, because that's when I started looking really bad. So I went to the emergency room, and I was successfully diagnosed with pemphigus. When I first thought about being involved in a trial, I was real concerned because of my lack of mobility. It would be hard to actually go to the hospital or facility on a weekly, monthly, day-to-day basis. But the team at Science 37 made it really clear that the trial was going to be patient-oriented, that they were going to have nurses come visit me, and the medication that I needed was going to be delivered to me, and that being a participant in the trial would help with the disease for others. I'm seeing progress with the treatment. As you can see, a lot of the marks and crusts have disappeared, and my confidence level has gone through the roof, knowing like, okay, we're getting somewhere. And I believe that I can continue now to finish my credential and become a teacher. When something arises or I'm not sure about what's going on with the disease, I just simply take a picture and I send it through my smartphone via Nora, and they're able to reply quickly, actually. I'm surprised at how quickly they do reply to let me know, like, this should be expected, or how do I care for it? How should I treat it if it's worrisome? My experiences with hospitals and other doctors' offices, you just feel like a number. With this type of trial, the doctors, the staff make you feel human. It's the gift of hope.
Thank you. So Angel actually came to us. He would have never been in a trial typically. He found us through the social media, and he came to us, and what we're finding is not only are we exponentially increasing recruitment in trials, we're also increasing the diversity of patients in our trials and making it more reachable for those that are underserved in this area. Through these various things, what we've discovered is there's lots of opportunities to transform trials, and I have a list of different things that we're doing at Genentech and Roche around the various areas in which we can use digital tools. They're really a new research tool that we haven't fully leveraged, and we're just starting to learn in the pharma industry, and we're always looking for partners to help us understand and learn how to do this better. One of the other areas, so what we're finding is technology is creating a new world in which we can really understand more about the time outside the clinic. So I wanted to quickly share with you, running out of a little bit of time, but what we're starting to realize is that technology can help us understand what the patient is doing outside the clinic. This is a standard chart for a Parkinson's disease trial. You have the placebo arm with 3 other treatment arms, and typically all we have is those 4 data points, and we want to know what's going on in between those data points. And so we created this Parkinson's app.
Imagine a future where treatment options for patients are not just based on occasional assessments by physicians, but also based on how the patient is doing every day. At Roche pRED, we are trying to make that vision a reality. By providing patients with smartphones that can collect disease-relevant data, we're looking to capture objective measures of disease severity and progression. If you will, we're creating a digital extension to physician rating assessments in order to improve patient care.
So we believe smartphone-based remote patient monitoring will be valuable in many indications. Our starting point was a trial in Parkinson's disease.
The focus was on keeping things simple for our trial participants. So we designed a custom app asking patients to complete 6 active tests and passive monitoring on a daily basis wherever they are. The voice test is first. Here you need to take a deep breath and make a steady, single ah sound for as long as possible into the mic. This allows us to pick the tremor in the voice. Next is the balance test, where you stand still for 30 seconds. This is evaluated using data from the smartphone's accelerometer, gyroscope, and magnetometer. Then comes the gait test, asking you to walk for 20 yards. Using the same sensors, we can evaluate walking patterns. The 4th test is the dexterity test. Place the smartphone on a table and tap at a regular pace using the index and middle finger. The last 2 tests focus on tremor. The rest tremor test, you need to lay the same hand in your lap and count down from 100. Lastly, the postural tremor test asks you to hold the smartphone in your outstretched hand. Again, we make use of all relevant sensors. After completing the active tests, patients will then pop their phone in their pockets and carry it around with them throughout the day.
pRED is well on its way towards collecting reliable, quality-of-life evidence under real-world conditions.
So our first line results with this really lined up with the medical literature. The sensor was picking up the same frequency as a Parkinsonian tremor. And we found that the longitudinal was really key. From the spectrum data to the spectra, you can really start to really visualize the impact of the drug on the patient. You can see early on they have a visible tremor and down to no visible tremor. This is pretty fundamental for us. And then ultimately our end game is to really complement the traditional physician rating scale with much richer data that we're getting from the sensor. So I'd like to just end that, historically we've always used regulatory as the excuse for why we might not do something different or try a different novel endpoint. But I really believe the regulatory winds are changing and they're quite supportive for transformation. And there's a variety of guidances that have come out. And I'm sad to say, actually, even though there is social media guidance and there's an e-consent guidance, pharma still has really not picked some of these tools up and integrated it as a standard process. So I think there's a lot for us that we can do in that space, as well as the White House Precision Medicine Initiative is focused on not only precision medicine, but the underlying things that create the bottleneck in clinical trials. So with that, I believe the future of clinical trials is quite promising with the engaged patients and the better research tools. But fundamentally, what we want to get to is really get to a world where there's continuous evolving digital labels and not the ugly paper package insert that you saw Esteban pull out yesterday. What we really want to bring to the world is a personalized digital label that has continuous data not only at the population level, but also at the patient level. Thank you.